Okay, our third presenter for this afternoon is Mary. Mary, if you could come up to the stage when you're ready. Mary is the Chief Marketing Officer at Ditto. She has over 20 years experience in leading cross-functional teams to build brand equity and drive sales. Mary is a results-orientated person and has worked with brands like CocaCola, Kraft and Campbell's. Today, Mary is going to be talking to you about birds of a feather, eat, drink and wear the same brands. Over to you.
All right, and then I need the clicker. Great. Well, that was awesome setup from Kyle and Michelle in terms of clustering. So I'll be tying into what Kyle talked about with pictures, from a picture perspective in social data. And visualization, I had slide envy there. So I think after this meeting, I'm going to try to sell pictures to Kyle and buy better visualization from Michelle. A little setup for anybody that wasn't here last year or is not familiar with Ditto and using image recognition, computer vision for processing photos. Yesterday, if anyone was in Kelly Salisbury from Hallmark session, she talked about a Forrester report that said visual listening is about 10 years behind text listening. So hopefully with companies like Ditto and Glimpse It, who's also here today, you'll start to see that we're catching up quickly. And if you are not listening to photos, I want to give you a little bit of background on why you should, and then talk about, in true IIeX form, something that's never been seen before, something new we're doing with clustering analysis. So first of all, we're all walking around with smartphones, documenting our day. I saw a lot of people taking pictures in this session, and people are doing it all day long. 1.8 billion, in fact, shared every day. And fewer and fewer of those posts contain text. Of course, the posts contain brands, particular consumer brands and brands that are part of our everyday lives. I'm from the Bay Area. Ditto's based in Cambridge, but I'm in Oakland. And of course, we had a lot of stuff going on earlier this year with the Patriots, and of course now with the Golden State Warriors. And you see pictures like that and things we eat and drink all the time in photos. But these photos don't often contain text. And we look at public photos, so we look at Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. And you can see here that here's Bolthouse Farms in this picture, someone talking about back to being a health freak. So very good usage occasion, insights into how they're using the product, but no reference to the brand. Here's Uber out in the Bay Area with me. Someone had a not so good ride on the way home in Boston, in fact, and tweeted their experience, but didn't mention Uber in the text. It's just a screen grab from the app. And then there's our friends at P&G with some kids playing with a Pampers box. Clearly a customer, a great piece of UGC to license on Tumblr, but no reference to the brand in the text. So all of the text listening companies would miss these posts because the brand is not referenced in the text. So how do we do it? We're using machine vision. We're based in Cambridge, our headquarters, MIT-trained scientists. We've built an algorithm to look for these brands, even when they're reversed and upside down and cut off, like the AT&T and the Country Crock and Cruz logo there. We're processing millions and millions of photos daily, and again, finding them even when they're cluttered. Like that. And how do marketers use them, my last setup slide, to unlock insights via the rich context of photos. So we were talking about, Michelle was just talking about the richness that's in photos in terms of sentiment and pairings and sentiment and smiles. We measure faces and smiles. To analyze trends, what's not just your text share of voice, but what's your visual share of voice. How is one campaign comparing to another in terms of photos? Photos are much more emotional, more memorable. We process them faster. So how are you doing visually? So that's on the insight side. On the engagement side, community managers are using them to engage, to have conversations on Twitter, to favorite, retweet, find influencers. And then, of course, from an ad targeting standpoint, to target people who are your customers, your competitive customers, in the same category. So that's the background. And now moving on to the new stuff. This is one of, we have a direct platform, and then we also have an API that we license to partners. And in the platform, one of the screens is Affinity Brand. So this is Harley Davidson, and these are, of the people that we have found that have posted pictures of Harley Davidson, these are the other brands in their photos. Now Adidas, Starbucks, Coke, that's kind of in a lot of them. And of course, we're picking up some platform logos like Google and Snapchat, and I think Tumblr's in there, Facebook, TimeHop, et cetera. But some of these other brands are not necessarily what you would see just on a normal basis, just on percent. These are like 7% down to 1 or 2% for Batman. So we also have a tab in our platform that normalizes this. So you can see kind of what's over-indexing. But what we're doing now is looking at the relationships between the brands based on users sharing their photos. So, look familiar from what Kyle just presented, a clustering analysis. So we took all this data, we took a subset of the data. We have about 21 million matches in our database, and we took a little over 1 million from November, December last year. I'm working with a PhD student at Yale, math candidate, who took a slice of this data for a few categories. We looked at beverages, and we looked at some transportation brands to see what happened. And we're using the principles of homophily, about things clustering together. So kind of an eye chart here, I'll break it down more. But we found here, appropriate for Atlanta, Georgia, that Coca-Cola was the center of the universe in this world. So we looked again at Coke, at sort of soft beverages, and then beer and liquor, and then we looked at cars, motorcycles, and bicycles. So we also see some other popular brands, Jack Daniels, of course, often paired with Coke, Corona, Harley, Monster, Red Bull. Highly photographed brands, either because people are consuming them or because of advertising and sponsorship placements. So Coke obviously had a lot of exposure last year with World Cup. Same thing's happening now. So these connections, these lines, are based on the same user sharing the brand in multiple photos in their stream. It doesn't have to be the same photo, but multiple times. So, Mathematica separated these into communities based on how often they were sharing. So I don't have all the data here, and obviously this is multiple brands. I don't have other sources of data, but I sort of said, hey, maybe as an analyst, you could call this like the social community, the racing, the extreme sports, the fast community, the kind of normal, everyday Coca-Cola community, I don't know, the center, American community. And then I called this one, maybe this is like the hipster community here, because you've got Harley and Brooklyn Lager and Santa Cruz. What's going on there? Why is Harley in those? Why is the machine not knowing anything about the relationships between these brands, clustering them like this? And so when we filtered it even more to just the brands with 10 or more, or with 50 or more shares. So that slide before had 10 or more shares. This is 50 or more. You see those that same structure is persistent. So there's obviously some relationship between these brands. And then I took a different slice at it and looked at categories. So if we just look at beverages, you see that Coke, Mountain Dew, all these brands are connected, which might make sense, because if your beverages are consumed almost every day, you might swap it out. You maybe are at a vending machine and you're picking out a different flavor. So that sort of made sense that a high frequency, highly switching category the same users would be sharing multiple brands. In liquor, I saw a lot of connections, but again, this is over the holidays. So what we see in Twitter photos for liquor is a lot of times party, and someone's taking a picture of their whole shelf, or maybe it's a scene at a bar, or ready for tonight, things like that they say. In beer, when we filtered down to just 50, there was not as many sharing, and my hypothesis on that is beer might be more brand loyal. You're a Bud Light drinker, you're a Budweiser drinker, you're a Corona drinker, etc. But it was interesting that Corona was connected to both brands. My hypothesis was that is when you look in photos, Bud Light and Corona both tend to have beach, outdoor associations, very social, younger associations in their photos. And then Corona and Heineken, both very accessible imports, popular imports. So maybe that's why Corona is connected to both of them. And then this hypothesis proved out, and one of the reasons we compared beverages to transportation is something like cars. Now, they all had a connection to Coke, but when you look at just the car category, they're not connected to each other. And it's probably, we don't buy cars every day. We don't take pictures of them every day. So it's a category that wouldn't have as much social sharing, just the nature of the category. So let's take a look at a closer look at some of the connected brands and why are they connected. So Harley and Santa Cruz. Are you guys familiar with the brand Santa Cruz? All right, we'll be in a minute. Everyone knows Harley, right? And it's an iconic brand that's not just on the motorcycle. Harley and Jack Daniels also are on a lot of shirts and other items. It's a brand that's really extended its franchise and become, to symbolize so much more than the motorcycle. It's a way of life, a personality. And Santa Cruz has a similar kind of following, and I'll show you that. So these are 66 people in this data set shared both brands in the 2-month period. Why did they do that? 5 Seconds of Summer, 5 SOS, but it's a popular Australian pop band, and their band members, who's it, Michael Clifford and Callum Hood, both tend to wear their logos a lot. And there's multiple pictures of these guys in their Harley clothes and their Santa Cruz skateboards and bicycle clothes. And here's just an example. There were 66 users that did this, but here's one, Melissa Garcia, who has a huge following, who's taken, she's a huge fan, and she's taken pictures of both of them. So sort of arbitrary that these two brands came together. It's not that a user necessarily would use these two products in one occasion, but because the band members, who are highly photographed, have a huge following among a demographic that likes to be on Twitter, that brought these brands together. So as a researcher, as a marketer, if you are after this kind of crowd, this is helpful to know how they're connected in photos, and maybe you want to get the band members to wear your logo or engage with your product. Another example, so again, we talked about Coke and Corona already, 170 co-shares. So again, this is a small data set in our sample. 170 people shared both brands during this two-month period. Here's an example. This is, and I actually pulled, instead of the tweet, the machine matching. So you see where we recognize the logo for Coke and recognize the logo for Corona. This is a surfer in Argentina who had 128,000 tweets. It's almost all photo-based and video-based. And he's frequently documenting the beverages that he's bringing with him to the beach and on his surfing occasion. So a great example of influencer identification and understanding the context of how he's sharing his day, and there probably be, if you're the marketer, you maybe want to license the photo. I mean, that Corona picture would be amazing in a Corona gallery of the true brand positioning getting reflected in user photos. So what else can you do with this? So again, this is brand new that we're starting this clustering analysis. We haven't even productized it yet, so now's the time to get your request in. I want to do some pilots. And here's just, I'm sure you guys can think of a lot more uses for this, but here's some of the things based on my experience that I thought about. I was showing you the brand network, so co-promotions, merchandising things together. Coke and Corona, your beach solution. You don't drink them necessarily in the same occasion, but maybe you're drinking one part of the day and one later in the day, or they're for different people in your group. Line extensions, for licensing. We see a lot of course, ice cream brands with all the candy tie-ins, et cetera. Sponsorship selection. You're going after, you want to sponsor the same things that Coke or Harley is sponsoring because you want to go after that target. And of course, media placement and ad targeting, maybe because one media group is hard to buy on, but you can get at those same people through a different targeting criteria. So that's sort of all based on the brand sharing network. And then, what I haven't even done yet, and maybe this is what Kyle and I can work on, is the user friendship network. So it's connections between people and not necessarily their brands. Identifying memes and visual trends. You saw the Twitter conversation twins. That was based on text. What if we could do that now on photos? And segmenting customers by that, and brand adoption, and how do you find the influencers based on watching how things spread? And causes. We were talking with P&G earlier about like a girl and things like that. Campaigns, and how do you watch the spread of things like that. So I think there's more out there, and again, this is brand new, and I wanted to expose it to the research community to get your ideas. Two more quick things. What's next for Ditto, and how does this even get better? We've been around for about 2 years. We've been focused on brands, tracking brand logos. We have about 2,000 brands in our system, constantly adding over 5,000 versions of logos. Now we're doing scenes and objects. So in the past, we could tell you American flag, Starbucks, and Sierra Nevada. Now we can tell you flip-flops, sunglasses, beach, water, cup, iced versus hot, or can versus bottle, dog, boat, types of dogs, sunglasses, all kinds of things like that. So that's still getting productized, but very exciting in terms of processing photos either from the wild or maybe photos that you have sourced that you send to us via our API, and we can tell you what's in them versus you having to manually code them. And again, partnerships, API partnerships. Trax is one of our partners. We just announced a partnership with MDC, and MDC partners, a bunch more coming. Again, analyzing the photos you have, refrigerators, cabinets, drawers, international networks, beyond Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. And for panels, we can look at, if someone gives us permission, we can look at Facebook. And then, of course, video processing, which is another growing way of communication. So I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'm happy to take some questions. I wanted to give a shout out to James Williams, who's the PhD candidate that I'm working with. We have a common, his advisor is Nicholas Christophsis, who does a lot of work in this area, and he's on our board.
Thank you, Mary. That was excellent. Well done. So, Mary, when we met earlier, you were worried about going over time.
I know, I talked fast.
You killed it. So we do have some time for some questions. So open it up to the floor.
Thank you. That was a really interesting talk, really interesting product, some really cool sounding capabilities. My question, I'm not sure kind of how extensive you said you're still piloting. I came into this talk because I was interested in the level of kind of inherent sociability that people associate with different products. So some product categories like soft drinks and alcohol tend to be perceived very socially. They have very socially centric advertising campaigns. They tend to be shared a lot. I'm curious, I don't know if you've looked at a bunch of other things, but have you seen brands or brand categories where something like this maybe doesn't work as well, or conversely, areas where it works particularly well, or maybe even things that aren't shared that much get that much more use out of this? I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on like those kinds of inherent social categories of products.
Yeah. Well, good question. And first of all, just to be clear, the Ditto product is available, and we license that, and there's lots of information on our website about how to get the brand tracking. What is new is the clustering analysis and also the scenes and objects. So in terms of what brands are social, anything that is worn or consumed in or near the package tends to be what we get the most photos of. So sports team logos, fashion logos, Nike, Adidas, things that are commonly seen. And of course, beverages, snacks, candy, things that you might just be consuming in your day, and you're taking a photo with your friends, and the product is in the photo. What wouldn't be, and that's on the logo side. Then as we roll out the scenes and objects, it's going to be all kinds of things. I mean, we're already doing faces and smiles, but dogs and cats, I mean, I can't wait to get pet companies as clients, because we haven't done that before, because people don't take a picture of their meow mix, but they sure do take a picture of their cat. So the things that work better are just things that are in your everyday life. In terms of B2B, it's kind of dependent on if that brand does a lot of advertising. So we get a lot of photos that are of celebrities in front of a wall of logos, or a lot of like Red Bull. There's a lot of pictures of Red Bull being consumed, but there's also a lot of pictures of Red Bull signage at events, or CocaCola at World Cup and things like that. So just a matter of, is your product in somewhere where someone's going to take a picture of it, then we probably have it. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
One more question? And that's a no. Okay, Mary, thank you very much. Excellent.